Welcome back to another episode of the Inviting Shift podcast. I'm your host, Christina Smith, and I'm excited to be diving into this week's topic. Relationships can be challenging, and they don't have to be as hard as we make them out to be. Whether you have a challenge with a partner, a family member, or a friend, and let's face it, we all have at least one of these, this is the conversation for you. Our special guest today is Visser. Anne is all about communication. She's been working with people and organizations for over 20 years to help them communicate authentically and in alignment with what's most important to them. Today, she's going to help us have what she calls pivotal conversations. You know, those hard conversations that make us all just a little bit, queasy, mainly because we just don't have enough practice. It's going to be uncomfortable and it could change your relationships for the better. Here's our conversation. Well, welcome, Coach Anne Visser, to the Inviting Shift podcast.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to this conversation on the Inviting Shift podcast.
Me too. I'm so excited about what we're going to talk about today because I think it's so essential, such an essential skill. But first, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do to help people.
Sure. I equip individuals and organizations and I've been doing that for over 20 years now, to communicate in a way that aligns with their values so that tomorrow they're happy with the way they communicated today. I am a certified John Maxwell coach, speaker, and trainer. And so I teach young people and students. I have a program called How to Avoid Falling for a Jerk. Talk about needing confidence, right? And that's been written by Dr. John Vanette, but I love that program. I've been teaching it now for 10 years. I've had opportunity to teach values-based leadership skills and principles to students in Paraguay with John Maxwell. That was an exciting trip. And I've been able to teach and train addicts in recovery in our local jail and in a recovery home, a local recovery home here, to help them with the changes from the inside out, with that personal growth and relationship values and principles, to support their sobriety, which is so important, to surround themselves with good people. And I have a membership for Christian women called the Sisterhood Journey Membership that focuses on the 4 lanes of communication. We talk about God talk, self-talk, people talk, and leadership talk. And right now, our lane is the people talk lane. And
yeah, we're going to talk about people. And I think that this is so essential, not just for intimate relationships, but I know that women my age, we have lost a lot of friendships because we were afraid to have those hard conversations and bring up the hard thing. And so some of us learned that it was just easier to ghost them. But then when you get to be our age, you're like, where'd all my friends go? Oh, right. I had a hard time having all those hard conversations. And so instead of having them, I've lost connection, which I think is such a shame when it seems like such a simple solution is to get some communication skills, right? And be able to have those conversations and feel confident about them.
Yes, and my people too are people pleasers, and I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I speak from experience. And so we have this need to feel nice and seeking other people's approval and just being told, you need to be the nice girl or the nice with terrible words, right? And so we seek to do that. And then you're right, we don't have those conversations we need to have, because I think they're vital to healthy relationships. And how can people know who we are and what we really want if we don't ever tell them? They have no idea. And so the frustration on both sides, I think that knowing is just essential for connection. And people can't know who we are if we don't share those hard conversations with other people.
I love that you brought up that being nice because I think that that's like one of our biggest fears of coming with hard conversations is to be like, what if they don't like me, or what if they judge me for having this thought or wanting this thing that I want or whatever. And it can be really, really scary, right? I mean, because those are a lot of uncomfortable emotions at one time. And if we're not comfortable with our emotions, that can be a real challenge. And so some of us just choose to give up instead. And I don't want that to happen. So that's why we're talking today. How can we have these conversations in a way that we're going to feel good and comfortable And it still might feel hard, right? I mean, I think when we practice anything, it can feel hard at first, but it gets easier as we go. But with some really great skills that you have to share with us, how is it that we can approach these in a way that feels in alignment with who we are so that we don't have to let go of all these relationships? We can actually have the conversation.
Uh, Great question. How can, let's set up a realistic expectation. They're never going to
Sure.
be comfortable.
Okay. Fair enough.
For most people, they're not
Mhm.
comfortable. For most people, they're challenging. For most people, kind people, kind hearted, agreeable people, we don't want to upset people needlessly. But
Mhm.
I have learned in the hard way, because I do what I do because we struggled in our marriage to have these conversations. Both of us did not want to have conflict. We avoided conflict. And when you avoid conflict,
Mm,
you avoid talking about the really important things that need to be talked about. We didn't have these conversations. And so we weren't connecting deeply. And in fact,
mm,
an emotional space grew in our marriage to the point where our marriage crashed, and we needed to kind of reevaluate, go back to the drawing board, say, what are we missing here? We were very young. We were missing really essential skills to have pivotal
sure.
conversations. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and learn, how do we have these hard conversations and build connection instead of creating that emotional space? Because there's a way that we conflict that actually pushes us further apart. And there's a way that
Mm,
we can conflict and actually pulls us closer together. And those are the pivotal conversations that I help my people to have. I think it was Brene Brown that said, a deep sense of love and belonging is the irreducible need for every man, woman, and child. Everyone.
mm,
We need to feel like we belong and like we're loved. And I
mhm.
believe that it happens through these essential skills of pivotal conversations. And
I can
so,
agree with that. Yeah, because I think people are so afraid of conflict, but when I think about my some of my greatest relationships, the trust that is built is because we went through conflict together and we came out the other side. And so if you do that enough times, if you have these conversations enough times, there's a real trust that starts to get built. At least it did in my relationship, where I was like, okay, we're having a hard time right now, but I know from my past experience that he's going to stick this through with me and we're going to figure this thing out. And with that kind of energy, I can trust, and I can even bring down some of those walls that are coming up, right? When we have these hard conversations, I can bring up walls. But knowing that, yeah, whatever happens, we're going to figure it out and have a solution, that has actually bonded us more. So I just want to put out there that sometimes conflict can actually bring us closer if we have these beautiful skills in which we can communicate in a way in which people both feel like they're being heard and they're being able to speak their truth. Is at least that's my truth.
you are singing my song, Christina. And that was one of the first lessons we had to learn, is that conflict is the doorway to intimacy, as
Mm,
in, into me you see. And
mhm,
so when we conflict well, we actually get to see into each other and see each other's heart and see more than just the words, but see the
mm,
experience and the heart of the other person. And then I learned another lesson, is that when we conflict well, I actually get to see into me too in a deeper way. And that was
mm,
so new to me, to think that when we have a really good conflict, when I get to say what it is that's on my heart, I say things that I didn't even know were there.
mm.
And so I get to see more into my heart when we have a good conflict. And so it not only brings us closer together and brings intimacy and relationship, but it also helps me to see more about who I
Mm.
am, and a deeper sense of, oh, okay, didn't know that was there.
Definitely. I mean, that's where I think a lot of our personal growth comes from relationships, right? That's, I mean, not that we like to compare or measure to other people, but at the same time, it's like we get to see our own reflection. How do I show up when somebody speaks to me this way or says those things to me? how do I react when this thing happens to me or we have conflict? And it's really beautiful to be able, it's scary for some people. And yet, by looking at all of that, I always think that there's like gold that we're hiding underneath some of that stuff that we're scared to look at. And there's like real beauty there. Oh, I see. This is actually a wound of mine that's coming
Mm.
up, is
Mhm.
usually where we get to in a conflict, is like, wow, I see my wound, and ooh, I see that I'm also pushing on your wounds,
Mm.
and together we can kind of heal those things. I mean, individually and together we can heal those things so that we can see more of ourselves through other people. And I think that that's the real loss of walking away from a relationship, is like I always think like, what could I have learned by having that conversation, not just about them, but about myself and how I show up for other people.
Mhm. And beautiful lessons that we can learn in the midst of that when we can ask that question, what did I learn here?
Mhm.
And you brought up earlier the sense of trust that is built when we have those pivotal conversations, which I believe is another essential part of connecting and bonding. And when we can build that trust with one another, it deepens our love and our connection for one another. And it even grows our sense of commitment to each other. I like to think about each of these things as being on sliders. So, trust is on a slider. And so it's not static, but it keeps moving as we have more of those pivotal conversations. I get to see, oh, okay, it's safe for me to say
Mhm.
what's on my heart. It's safe for me. We've created this safe place together where I know that you're going to be assertive and you're going to tell me what's going on for you, but you're going to give me space to be able to say also what's going on for me. And
Mm.
so that safety builds a great deal of trust in relationships.
Yeah. So say I have this hard conversation and I'm feeling like antsy pantsy about having this. What is it that I should know before going into one of these pivotal conversations?
I think the mindset of pivotal conversation is really helpful in the sense that
Mm.
um, one conversation may not fix this problem.
Mhm.
And so it's okay to have like a lifestyle of pivotal conversations. And in fact, important to have a lifestyle. So it's okay and not to get antsy if it's not fixed right away, that we can come
Mm.
back to it again. And I think that gives a sense of, okay, we can relax into this conversation. We don't have to solve it today, but we can say important things that are important pieces of the puzzle of that challenge that we're facing because it's coming
Mm.
because there's some sort of challenge that
Mhm.
somebody is feeling within the relationship. And in fact, that's why we're having the conversation. And so I
Beautiful.
think
So
that,
maybe go in without expectation is what I'm hearing, of like expectation that it's going to go a certain way or even going to be complete after this one conversation. So adjusting our expectations and our mindset. I love that.
mm. And the first C, we call them the three C's of pivotal conversation. The first C is to check emotions. Now,
Mm.
I think it's one of the most challenging and yet important parts of pivotal conversations is to learn to be able to manage my own emotions. And
Mhm.
so to check in with myself and where I am. Now, often these conversations, they're going to come up multiple times. And so
Mhm.
we can kind of see it coming. We know that it's going to be a conversation we need to have. And so I love to sit in I call it my thinking chair and journal through some questions that are incredibly helpful for me and for my clients to understand where are they right now. And so I encourage my clients to check in with what am I thinking? What
Mm.
am I feeling? What's really troubling me about this situation here? And sometimes that's all you need is
Mhm.
to get to the bottom of that. Well, it's not that the dishes weren't done. It's more that every night I come home and there's a pattern of, and I'm just feeling so disrespected and I want to feel like we're part of a team. I hear my women say that I want to feel like I'm a part of a team and I'm not alone in this.
Mhm.
And then the last question is, so what is it that I really want?
Oh, what a great question. My husband, when I go ranting and raving about something, sometimes he'll just look at me and go, "What is it that you actually want out of this?" And ooh, if that, because here's the thing, I probably haven't even thought about it myself. If I'm emotionally charged, I don't
Mhm.
know what I want. I just know I got emotion and I got words coming, and that can be so detrimental. So I love this checking in with ourselves about our emotion. And then what is it I actually want out of this?
Yes. And then I say to my women, so now let's check the motives, okay? Because the motives are
Mm,
kind of slippery, and sometimes
mhm,
the motive is I just want to be right. And
mm,
he's wrong.
of
And
course.
right? That's
Obviously.
that's not a great place to start a biblical conversation. Then, like, because then we become the right fighters, and I'm trying to prove that I'm right.
Mm,
Where is what I really want? Going back to that question again, what is it I really want? Well, when we get to that, what is it I really want? Maybe what I really want is just to be heard, and I want a
mm,
system for whatever that problem is, that physical problem that we're, the mess in the kitchen. I
mhm,
remember a time when I was sitting in our kitchen at our kitchen table, and I was sitting with our our daughter. She was an adult. She is an adult and was an adult at this time, and I had to have a conversation with our son. And I just blurted out to her, "I just don't trust him."
mm.
And she looked at me and she said, "Mom, you better check that." I was like, I knew as soon as it was out of my mouth, I knew that I had a problem. I knew it was me. I was part of the problem because I didn't know though what was going on inside of my heart, and so I went to my thinking chair, and I started to journal out these questions, and I recognized very quickly I was stuck back in 2005 when we had really significant challenges raising this young man, but my emotions weren't current with where he was. He wasn't there anymore. He was an
Mm,
adult, and he's a beautiful guy. And so when I went to have this pivotal conversation, it was about boundaries. It was nothing. Like, it was so big in my mind, but
mm,
after I journaled, it was like, okay. And I know that I would have sabotaged that pivotal conversation if I hadn't checked my emotions first to see
mm,
what's going on in my heart. What is my motive? And my motive was to set a boundary, but I was stuck back in history, and I was going to have a conversation that actually would have hurt the relationship instead of building on the relationship. That's how important it is to check emotions in pivotal
yeah.
conversations.
Definitely. I think checking our emotions before making any choices is really a good idea. I always go back to, I think it's the Alcoholics Anonymous that has HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I also add sick, PMS, menopausal, like any of these things that are going to bring up extra emotion. We need to get as grounded as we can first, right? So if you're hungry or thirsty, like go take care of that. If you're tired, go take care of that before you have this conversation. Because, like you said, if I'm in anger or shame or fear, any of those things, I can blow this thing up because it feels uncomfortable to me. And I make it like this huge deal like, oh, this relationship's never going to change. It's always going to be this way. And it's like, holy cow, Christina, bring it down. You just didn't do the dishes. Like, right? Or my husband has a habit of moving stuff when I need it. Like I've taken something out to use it and he moves it right away and puts it back. And I like most days I'm okay with that. But the days where I want to blow up about him, that's when I have to check myself, this emotional check of being like, hold on, Christina, what's going on for me? Oh, right. I have this whole list of things that I'm running through my head that I need to get done. I'm feeling pressured for time. I'm feeling low energy because I don't know that I have all the energy to do all these things. And that's what's really like, it's not him or this thing. It's all of these other things. So I love this checking your emotions and your motivations first, because is my motivation here just to make him feel bad because I'm feeling bad? Or am I really trying to get what I want?
Mhm. Yes, and sometimes the motive is really to punish the other person because they've hurt me, right?
Right.
And that's not going to be a good motive going into a pivotal conversation, because the goal of community, the goal of relationship is connection. And
Mhm.
so if my goal is connection here, how do I present this challenge that we're
Mm,
facing and still talk about it, but not create that wedge that pulls us apart, but talk
yeah.
about it in a way that's actually going to pull us closer together. And so, starting with good, pure motives and
Mhm.
knowing what we want can truly help us to have
Mm.
an effective pivotal conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I tell some of my clients to start with the intention. When
Mm,
you start one of these conversations, what is your intent? My intention is I really want us to get past this. I really want us to be connected in a more intimate way. That something like that should probably be your intention.
yes.
Not I want to shame him so he never does this again. Like that's not going to be helpful. And the other
Mhm,
thing that I always like to look at is, and I teach, is we're not on opposite sides. So many times when we're in a conflict, we think like, "Oh, that person." And then what does our brain do? Is our brain starts going, "Yeah, let me tell you why they're wrong and they're, bad or they have these evil intentions or whatever." Instead of we're actually both on the same side. We want to have
mhm.
this connection, right? It's that conflict that's on the other side. So if we can figure
I
out what each of us need, we can overcome this conflict, but we're on the same side. That's what I like to believe. And then if we're on the same side, my motivation can't be to shame you, right? I mean
mhm,
that's not a really great relationship if that really truly is. What is my intention here? My intention is to get over this conflict so that we can both get what we want out of this and move on or
mhm.
continue the conversation at least.
Right. And we talk about creating we solutions, and that's a big part of
Yes.
creating we solutions is the
Yes,
the
exactly.
the challenge of seeing the person on the other side is they become the enemy. And I've actually heard women say that, like, he's my enemy. And when they become
Mm.
the enemy, we become the good girl,
Oh,
the good
sure.
guy.
Yeah, I'm right.
Yeah, and then we actually sabotage that pivotal conversation going in that way, and so,
Mm.
um, we're a volleyball family, and so, I like to think about us being on the same side, and the challenge or the problem is on the other side of the net,
Yeah.
and we're kinda bouncing the ball back and forth here on this side of the net to figure out what is that we solution to get to a good solution that works for both of us, and that can truly help us move forward in relationship.
Right. No winner or loser. We're part of the same team here. I like that volleyball analogy. Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
So after we got our motivation and our emotions in check.
Mhm. The second C is to communicate and clarify, and so it's to make an invitation, so, for conversation, um, that thing that happened yesterday, I wanna talk about that today, and that I felt, and I love it's in psychology, they talk about, using the I instead of the you, and it just is so true. When we're
Mhm.
saying you did and you like what you did, we're just pointing the finger and it's the accusation and it doesn't land well. It's not a good way to start a conversation. You've already lost them before you even go into the conversation. And so it's to use that I, that pronoun. And that's why
Mm.
you've already done the work. You know what your thoughts and your feelings were. You know what was really troubling you about. So you know the topic. It's important to know this is what we're talking about right here.
Yeah, this is an ownership piece though, which is sometimes hard for some of us who want to be that nice girl, right? And he's the enemy. If you see it that way, this becomes a very hard conversation to use I statements because we want to blame it. So I love this part because this is all about how we're starting to own this for ourselves. I
Mm,
feel you didn't make me feel this way. I
mm,
feel this. I think this. And being able to own that again is not only a better way of communicating, but it's one of those areas where we're learning more about ourselves. Wow, what is it that I'm actually thinking about this? What's the story I'm telling myself about this action or this word that he said? And so I love this.
And you talked about the blame, and there's something in us that takes a little bit of pleasure in blame. It kind of
Mm,
brings down the anxiety just a little bit if I can blame the other person for the
mm,
situation or what happened or what was said. And it so sabotages that pivotal conversation, that blame, and then it just bounces back to defensiveness. And so
mhm.
instead you're just bouncing that ball back from one side of the net to the other for defensiveness and blame, and that goes nowhere. So that ownership piece is really important, and using that I pronoun to enter into the conversation. This is what we're talking about. This is the topic.
Yeah. And this
And
part is about me. It's not about you, right? It doesn't
right,
matter really how you acted or what you said. This is how I'm taking what's going on.
right. And then it's a dialogue. So we invite feedback and we want to hear. And I say, look for the gold. And you actually use that term. And I
Mm.
love that term because that gold, it's the sound of a person's heart opening up.
Mm.
That's the gold.
Mm.
And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for what are they feeling? What are they
Mm.
thinking? What are they worried about?
Mhm.
And what is it that they want? We're looking for those same things that we've just journaled out ourselves, but we're looking for it in their heart, what's going on, and their experience, so that we can actually get into their experience. And that requires us to listen deeply. And
Mm.
that is the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, without taking any of it, like, personally or as an attack, and just hearing it, like, just hearing it without the urgent, at least for me, it's without the urgency to fix it or change it or make it better, right? Like, oh, or then, try to throw that blame thing right back. Oh, well, you're feeling that way because of you or whatever, instead of really just listening and going, wow. I think one of the most powerful things you can do if you feel like you really need to do something, just repeat back what they've said. Oh, so this is what I've heard. That way, the other person feels heard. And if you needed to do something, you're doing something, right? You're validating to them that you have actually heard what it is that they're saying.
There's something so powerful about hearing your own words back. There's
Mhm.
something, because sometimes what comes out of our mouth, so often we're not even aware of what's coming out of our mouth. And it, it's so helpful to feel that someone is listening to me. I think it was David Osberger. He says, listening is so close to being loved that for most people, they're almost indistinguishable. I love that
Mm.
quote.
Mhm.
I
That is a
love that.
beautiful quote.
Yeah. And so to be able to listen and then to respond back with the words that are coming out of
Mm.
their mouth, as you said, to repeat back to them what they're really hearing is so powerful that the other person can feel like
Mm.
somebody is hearing me. You really are getting what it is that I'm saying. And in that, as that conversation carries on, I've seen it so often where the other person gets to the point of the gold. They get to what is really going on. And when you hear what is really going on, the other person will go,
Mm.
oh, because they hear the heart of the other person. And all of a sudden, the strange, bizarre behavior or whatever it was that was happening, it makes sense, where it
Mhm.
didn't make sense before.
Yeah, sure. If we hear, oh, well, like for me, a lot of it is like, whoops, there's that mother wound again, right?
Mm.
And all those voices that I hear, and I projected on you this thing, and I didn't even know that you were feeling that way. Like it's just, yeah, it's starting to go, wow, that's actually about me, and maybe I'm afraid of my abandonment wound or something. And when you said that, I just automatically assumed that, oh, that's it, we're over, you're going to be gone. And I got into that defensive space. So I think that's that's one of those parts where we're really finding our own gold and being like, and some people are like, wounds aren't gold, but they are if we can recognize them, right? I mean, that's the beautiful thing is that way each time that wound comes up, I can be like, oh yeah, there's that abandonment wound again. Yeah, that's not valid here. That's just coming up because of my brain wants to warn me about anything possible negative that could happen. Doesn't mean that it's true, but I'm learning more about myself, about what makes me tick and how I can get offended or go into defensive mode. The Inviting Shift podcast is brought to you by Christina Smith Coaching. If you've ever wondered what you might be doing right in relationships, I have a super quick quiz for you that'll tune you into the archetype that you lean into most while you are in relationship. I hope that you take it. It's only a few minutes. It's going to help you lean into your strengths and also look at some areas where you might want to be able to shift your energy. The quiz is at a link around here somewhere, or you can go to christina-smith.com/relationship quiz. And I really love that. And I know that these things are so hard, but my clients are like, "You act like this is easy." I'm like, "It's not easy." I'm like, "It's just worth it."
It is so worth it. It can really bring down the chaos in relationship. It can bring up the connection in relationship. It can bring up the understanding.
Mm,
It can help us to get in front of some of those triggers, because once we become aware of what those triggers are, it really help heal each other. Really, I just think that we get hurt in community, but we heal in relationship too. And then when we recognize, okay, these are my triggers, then we can get in front of them with this beautiful question. I love this question.
mm,
um, what do you need from me?
mm,
What do you need from me now? That's such a beautiful question. And I have seen um, men and women make some beautiful requests about what it is that they truly need. Um, in fact, in our own story, Christina, um, we didn't know what was going on, and my husband was having high triggers, and we were young, and it was these questions that actually started to open him up. But in the beginning, I knew that challenge wasn't about me. And my
mm,
response to him, instead of listening and instead of patience, it was talk to the hand, because I know this is not about me, and you deal with your
mm,
stuff. This is you. And I created a lack of like this unsafe space for us, where he wasn't feeling free to talk about what was happening inside of him. So he just stuffed it all down instead. And it
mm,
wasn't until that I made a choice and a decision, I'm going to care about this, and I'm not going to fight about this anymore. Not that
mm.
we didn't, and not that we did it perfectly, but that was
What are you trying to say? It wasn't over after that one conversation?
no, no. But that decision set me in a better place to be able to hear his heart.
Mm,
And in the midst of that and asking those questions, at first he couldn't answer them. He had no idea. It was buried so deep, he didn't know what was going on.
mm,
And triggers completely unrelated to where he was actually going and what the pain was. And eventually we came to discover that the pain, he began to open up about what was happening, what he was feeling, what he was thinking, and what he really wanted, and discovered that that pain was emotional abandonment, which the two of
mm,
us didn't have any clue about what that was.
mhm,
But and I said, what do you mean nobody's left you? What are you talking about? But then he began to describe what was happening, and then the triggers started to make sense.
mhm,
But it was only by asking those questions and creating a safe space in the first place, because that wasn't safe, and I had to begin to build trust with him. um, and I have permission to share this story with you and your listeners. I think it's really important in trust to share only stories that you've been given permission to share.
yes.
And but that story is really important for other people too, to give people hope about those triggers and those things that happened. Then what happened was, as I was able to ask him the question, what is it that you need from me? When I could see the trigger starting to be activated, we could talk about those things, and I could say, well, what do you need from me today? And we started to see the pattern. So when we go here, you're triggered. And when we do this, he would recognize, I'm triggered when we do this. And I say, okay, what do you need from me tonight? Sometimes he said to me, I just need you to look at me from across the room to know that you're in this with me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is so easy. I can do this
Mm,
for you. And so it broke it down into smaller steps, and it made it so much more manageable to be able to
mm,
have that pivotal conversation. Ask him what it was that he needed. Get in front of the trigger so that it wasn't so big anymore. And in many cases, it didn't happen anymore. And it just made it so much more possible, and it built the connection and the trust deeper for the two of us.
mm. That is such an important question. I cannot tell you how it has changed my life. What is it that I actually want out of this?
Mhm.
Because we can get so emotional and not even know what it is that we actually want out of the thing. Like, am I just sitting here complaining that you haven't done the dishes? Like, do I want you to wash? Because then what happens is I could complain about something, and then my husband goes to do it, and I'm like, well, I don't want you to fix it. And he's like, well, what do you want? And so it's so much more helpful for me. I love how you like journal that down first. Like, let me get through the emotional and then let me get really clear on what is it that I'm asking for, because I can't just complain and then hope he'll know what I want. I mean, I don't even know what I want half the time, but by asking myself that question, or when he asks me that question, it really makes me stop and pause and go, wow, what is it that I'm hoping to get out of this? Am I just whining and complaining for no reason? Or is there something that I'm actually looking for? And sometimes it's just like within myself, oh, actually, what I want is not to put so much energy on that thing. Or what I want is like something I can do for myself. But because I'm emotional and unclear, and he just happens to be the closest target, it's just sometimes by a default, easy, like so easy to get slipped into this is about you when it's really about me, right? These wounds, like the
Right.
wounds that your husband had, those were about him. That's not to say that you can't help in some way or you can't
Mhm.
support him. What is it that you need from me? How can I support you?
Mhm.
But a lot of the work is within him.
Mhm.
You can't change his emotional abandonment wound. All you can
No.
do is support him in healing it himself.
Absolutely. We made that promise to care when we said I do.
Mm.
When we make a commitment to somebody else, I believe we make the promise to care about. So that's to care about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then
Mhm.
it's a mutual caring. So it's not a one-sided, we're going to fix you. It's let's work together to fix
Right.
us.
Yeah,
And
let's work together for each of us to heal, really. I mean, we
right.
both have healing no matter how different, or one is advanced in personal growth work or not, we both still have to do the work.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, it was the people pleasing piece and learning to speak up and not play small and
Mm,
learning what it was that I really want because I had pushed that down so far. I couldn't, if he had asked me, I didn't even know. And he did many times ask me what it is I want. And I wasn't able to identify what it was I wanted because I had pushed that down so far. And that had nothing to do with him. That was me and my pain. And I
right.
needed to practice and get better at understanding me and what it was that I needed and wanted so that I could actually express to him succinctly
Mhm.
so that it didn't get lost like a needle in the haystack, succinctly what it was that I wanted and needed.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, what else is there? Did I miss a C? What was the
Yeah,
third one?
the
No.
third C, we kind of went backwards a little bit. The third C
Okay.
is to create those we solutions.
Oh,
Uh,
great. Just wanted to make
yeah,
sure we didn't note that that was actually through, and I knew that we had talked about it.
yes, yes.
Beautiful. Great. So the overview is to what are the C's? Check,
Yeah, the first C.
communicate, and yeah.
Yes, check emotions, communicate and clarify, and then create we solutions.
Beautiful. And it sounds so simple, but I know that it's not. So I know that you have a special gift for us today to be able to practice this and really learn how to go through the steps of this.
Yes, and the free resource really has to do with the first C. So if your people are listening and they've been putting off a pivotal conversation, that they just know that this is something they need to talk about. This free resource is called the 7 Day Challenge, and it's going to help you
Mm.
get ready for your next pivotal conversation. And
Nice. Hold your
so, yeah,
courage.
yeah, each day we're going to give you a short video and a simple action step that you can take to prepare step by step for your next pivotal conversation. And so that 7 day challenge is at forbetterforever.com/challenge.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that the link is around here somewhere that you can just clickety click on it. So, what a lovely conversation. So, if you've been putting off those pivotal conversations, I love that. I love that you call them pivotal conversations because I call them hard, which makes them seem like really hard, right? But pivotal means that, yes, it might be challenging to do that. But when we can learn how to do them in a good way, we can actually pivot our relationship into a better direction, hopefully. And
Yes.
so I find that so lovely. So if you have, and I know that we probably all have a conversation out there we could be having with someone, speaking our truth with someone, and maybe you're a nice girl and you are afraid, a nice woman, and you're afraid to hurt their feelings. This is a system that has been, I mean, tried and tested and used. So this is not just some things that Anne has just made up out of her mind because 3C sounded good. Like, this is actual work, and you can actually
Mm.
have these conversations. And my hope is that you'll be able to not just deepen your relationship, but also deepen that connection to yourself and
Mhm.
figuring out your own truth and what it is that we actually want. Because I don't think that we ask ourselves that enough in life.
Mm.
So thank you so much, Coach Ann Visser, for being here with us. I'm really thrilled about this conversation. I think this is going to help get people a little bit, I hate to say the word excited, but maybe a little bit more confident about how they're going in because they get to be clear on how they're going in. So thank you so much for being here today and having this conversation with us.
Well, it's mutual, Christina. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and a great big thank you for having me on the Inviting Shift podcast to talk about relationships and how to have pivotal conversations to build confidence. I think it's so
Thank you.
important. So, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Hey, one more thing. When we are all more confident and full of self-love, we can act more intentionally and mindfully. What would a world like that look like? I want to know. One way that you can help me with this vision is to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps more than you know, and it's just a few clicks to help me create a more beautiful world. And as always, remember to be gentle with your humanness.